In this video, I'm going to show you how to bind the edge of the quilt completely by machine. And hopefully, it's going to look good on both the front and the back. So for starters, I'm going to cut my binding strips 2.5 inches wide. I just like 2.5 inches wide. It works very well for the foot that I use for binding, and I think it makes a nice looking finish. So I'm showing you here that they're going to be cut 2.5 inches wide. If you have to piece together strips to make your binding long enough to go around the quilt, which 90% of the time you're going to have to do, you want to piece it in the way I'm just going to tell you right now. You will lay your two binding strips so that they are perpendicular to each other. And you want to test which way you're going to sew it, because you're going to sew it from one corner up here to the corner down here. And you want to sew on this angle. You can test that to be sure that that's the correct angle by just folding this back along that fold line to ensure that it's going to go out flat. What happens if you pin it in the other direction or stitch it in the other direction? So what happens if you stitch it in this direction, for example? And I'll just put a pin in there. If you make a mistake and stitch it in this direction, what happens when you fold it back is that when you fold it on that diagonal line, it's going to lay over your existing one. So you're just putting one on top of the other. That's not what we want. So remember, you can always test it by folding it back to make sure that it's going to make the strip longer. Okay, and then you're going to want to lay these two pieces perpendicular to each other. And if you want, you can have this top edge extending a little bit above the strip underneath. And you can have this edge over here, the edge underneath poking out just a little bit. And what that does is it gives you two little corners. It gives you these two little V-shaped corners, one right here and one right here. And that's a great place to put your needle down for when you start to sew. You can put pins in it. If you wish, you can draw a line across here to use as a guide. That's totally optional. It depends on how accurate you are with eyeballing it, but you can draw that line so you're ready to be able to follow that line. Okay, I'm ready to go to the sewing machine and sew this together. So here I am at the sewing machine. Now you can see that my fabric is kind of a grayish color, and I have black thread in here. Normally you want to use a thread color that matches or blends with the fabric that you're sewing. I'm using black thread just so that it shows up better. I have my general purpose foot on the machine, and I'm using a size 80 needle. And this can be universal, microtex, quilting needle, whatever type of needle that you like to use. Okay, I'm going to start out by pulling my bobbin thread tail to the top, and I'm going to take both of those threads under the foot and to the back of the machine. Then I'm going to put my needle down. And here where I've got this little V that I talked about before, here's my little V where the pieces come together. I'm going to slide that right back there and put that right up the V, right up against the needle, and put my foot down. And then I'm going to sew, keeping the line that I drew right in the center of that foot. My stitch length is 2.5 or 2 millimeters. 2 to 2.5 millimeters for your stitch length. And there's no need to tie off the ends of your threads. I'm just going to sew right down there along that line. When I get to the end, because I have many more seams to do, I'm going to take a few stitches off. I've already pinned my other corners together, my other strips together where I need to sew some more, so I'm just going to bring them around here. Push it right back there against the needle. And sew right down that line that I drew. And I think I have one more. Raise my needle, cut my threads, and then join me at the cutting table so I can show you where I've got these joinings. I'm just going to clip those threads. Cut off the long thread tails. So that I've got a long strip. Take the pins out. And then I want to trim my seam allowances to 1/4 of an inch. And you can do this with scissors. You don't have to use a rotary cutter. These do not have to be real exact. And then we want to press those seams open. My iron shuts itself off when it's not used for a few minutes, and then it has to reheat, and I don't think it's quite up to its hot temperature here yet. You can hit it with a blast of steam. So the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that all of your seams are facing in the same direction. So here's, if I keep sliding this through, I'll make sure that all of my seams are sewn in the correct direction, right sides together. Looks like I did a pretty good job with that. So the next thing we're going to do is fold this strip in half, long edge to long edge, like this, and just press it. So you probably don't want to watch me press this whole thing. Bear with me. So here's my block that I'm going to put this binding on. And I'm going to be sewing in this direction, this way. So this is going to be my starting end of the binding. So what I want to do at this end is to unfold this, and I'm going to turn the short side of the strip toward the long side like this, so it forms kind of a triangle here. And I'm going to press that and then fold it back up here in half. And the next thing that I want to do is audition this strip around my quilt square to make sure that I'm not going to have any seams from the binding strip landing at the corners of the block. So I'm okay here. Uh-oh, this one looks a little questionable because I have a seam right here. So what I'm going to do is just move this down a little bit and try again. That's much better. Taking it across to the other corner. So I'm okay at this corner. I'm good up here. There's no seam right here. But when I come down this way, I'm finding that this seam is very close to my joining here. And I don't want them that close together. So what I'm going to do is take this seam out, and I'm going to move this section up here higher so that the seam will fall up here where my finger is. And I'll go do that, and I will be right back. So I made that correction, and I've auditioned my binding all the way around the quilt, and there are no seams here at the corner, no seams here at the corner, no seams interfering at this corner, none at this corner, and where they're going to join down here, there's no seam that's close by this joining point. Okay? So remember, what we have here at the starting point is that we turned this one edge back so that we formed this little triangle and then folded it in half, and that's where our binding is going to start and end. That's where it's going to be joined. Some of the tools that I'll need for sewing on my binding include what you see here. Definitely we need pins. You may want to use a wallpaper seam roller just to put creases in, and you'll see how I use that. That's optional. You may or may not want to use it. We may or may not need a pencil, who knows. Scissors are always good to have. A ruler's always good to have. We do want some of these quilt clips, and we definitely want a stiletto. If you don't have a stiletto is just a rod with a little point on the end of it. If you don't have an actual stiletto, a seam ripper can be used for this purpose.